Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
I was invited to speak and open at a rally in St. Catharines. It was basically a no more lockdowns type rally. It was organized loosely by several local businesses. I was very receptive to offering encouragement to small business, to local businesses. Like I said, I was invited to the rally, and I felt strong sense to advocate on behalf of small business. For a whole year, small business, restaurants, hair care, all that, they put their lives on hold. And they did so, I think, with a lot of integrity, recognizing that long-term care, the devastation that was happening there was very important. It's something that they felt obliged to back off on their own rights and liberties, and just say, hey, okay, we're going to do this for the sake of those people who are most vulnerable. And so I felt it was absolutely the time to start advocating for small business. We couldn't carry on the way that we had, and those people were very patient, very quietly, watching their businesses fall away and disappear from through no fault of their own. And all of a sudden, when they felt that it was their turn, they wanted the government to advocate on their behalf. That's what I thought I was doing. That's what I went there to do. And I continue to do so to this day.
We will be filing charter motions on behalf of Mr. Bylsma, because the right to assemble and the right to freedom of expression are two clear charter rights that were violated in this situation.
One of the most frequent questions I hear from the public, besides did David Menzies ever get his whiskey, is where the heck are all the anti-lockdown politicians? Well, friends, they're out there, but they are few and far between, because they face harsh media criticism for expressing an opinion that seems to be contrary to the accepted norms of forced confinement of completely innocent Canadians. These politicians face a series of fake cancel culture mobs, and they also face professional consequences, sometimes from their own parties, for standing up for freedom and standing up for the people who actually voted for them. Just take a look at Derek Sloan. He's a staunch conservative, wildly popular in his own riding, and yet he was booted from his party, the Conservative Party, for being anti-lockdown and anti-World Health Organization. Now, today you're going to meet Dave Bylsma. Dave is one of Fight the Fine's latest clients. Now, Fight the Fines is our largest civil liberties project ever, where through a partnership with the registered Canadian charity, the Democracy Fund, and through the support of generous donors at home, Rebel News connects people who have received lockdown tickets with top criminal and civil litigators to fight those lockdown infractions in court at no cost to the victims of these overzealous lockdown enforcers. Now, Dave Bylsma is the mayor of West Lincoln, Ontario, and he received a lockdown ticket for attending an anti-lockdown rally way back in April. Now, the worst part, the police were used, it would seem, as political enforcers on behalf of Dave's political adversaries in town and on town council. Now, after we catch up with Mayor Dave, we're going to hear from Jenna Little. She's our Fight the Fines paralegal who's organizing the battle against Dave's lockdown summons. And then I'm going to ask you to support Dave, because we don't meet many politicians like Dave these days, and he needs our support. Take a listen.
I was invited to speak and open at a rally in St. Catharines. It was basically a no more lockdowns type rally. It was organized loosely by several local businesses. I was very receptive to offering encouragement to small business, to local businesses. Like I said, I was invited to the rally, and I felt strong sense to advocate on behalf of small business.
Which is, I think, exactly what we want politicians to do, right? If you're elected on a pro-business, small business platform, you're the guy I want to see at these kind of things.
Exactly. And there's a bit of a time context here, circa 2020, March 2020, when this all started, the grave concern was for those residents of long-term care and the fact that they seem to be getting there was a lot of devastating news coming from long-term care. Fast forward to April 10, the day of the infraction. Almost a year later, we had 4 viable vaccines, and for a whole year, small business, restaurants, hair care, all that, they put their lives on hold, and they did so, I think, with a lot of integrity, recognizing that long-term care, the devastation that was happening there was very important. It's something that they felt obliged to back off on their own rights and liberties, and just say, hey, okay, we're going to do this for the sake of those people who are most vulnerable. But April 10, by that point, we had 4 viable vaccines at that moment. Of course, there's been some change since then, but we had 4 viable vaccines. Locally, we're hitting numbers like 80% of local long-term care residents, as well as their caregivers, were all vaccinated at that point. And so I felt it was absolutely the time to start advocating for small business. We couldn't carry on the way that we had, and those people were very patient, very quietly, watching their businesses fall away and disappear through no fault of their own. And all of a sudden, when they felt that it was their turn, they wanted the government to advocate on their behalf. That's what I thought I was doing. That's what I went there to do, and I continue to do so to this day.
Now, how did the ticket come about?
So I would say that as a result of that, there was a backlash, a social media backlash. A lot of people saying that this was completely irresponsible, and as a result, there were other local politicians who headed up the cancel culture type mentality, and we actually have printed social media or social media posts that actually are calling upon the Niagara Regional Police to lay charges. I think some of that is a little untoward. Local politicians calling out on political opposition, asking them to have charges laid against them. So there was obviously a certain pressure to do so. There's a lot of implications for that. But not the least of which is subsequent to that, about 2 weeks later, I did receive summons to court, and here we are.
Now, outside of the cancel culture mob of politically motivated opponents, what has been the response from the community to you, like the voters, the people who really matter? Wow, how have they felt about what you've done?
Yeah. So, of course, mixed reviews. There are people who are absolutely thinking that I should be hung from the nearest tree
for your health.
Was very irresponsible, and so certainly that is a big part of our culture, and that should be no surprise to anybody. But also absolute love and adoration for those courageous people, and I think across the nation, there's handfuls of people who in every community understand. There's police, there are pastors, there are politicians who are standing for, against the no more lockdown, standing for small business, standing for, an economy, standing for our youth who are being just not more than inconvenienced, detrimentally affected for the rest of their lives because their educations are on hold. They're learning, the synapses in their brains are just not getting massaged, and for 2 years they've just been, left alone, anxiety, the whole thing. It's just terrible. And there's a deep love for those politicians, police, pastors that are standing up. I guess that's a little bit what fuels us. Although, I talk to each one of these men and they have a personal integrity. And I think that's, they see what's happening and they are asking questions. And you know what? At the end of the day, all I ever was doing was asking questions. When are we going to advocate for our small business?
You know, Dave, one of the things that we hear so often at Fight the Fines is where are the politicians to stand up for our rights? Where are the cops who are standing up for our rights? And you did. You stood up for what you think were the rights of small business owners and kids and people to just go about their lives now that we know more about the pandemic, and you received a summons for it. And so that's why I'm so proud to be able to offer you some help through fightthefines.com at no cost to you. We don't want you to worry about this ticket or this summons. We're going to fight it. And we want you to just go back out there and do what you think is best for your community and to represent the people who voted for you.
I continue to advocate. I'm doing so this Saturday again. So it's a great joy for me to do.
Friends, did you catch that? The police were pressured to charge Dave by pro-lockdown politicians and a cancel culture mob. And so the police did. That's mob rule. That's not how things are supposed to work here in Canada. And politicians on the left and the right should be able to attend political events and express their political opinions. That's literally their jobs. But it would seem that only some political events like BLM marches and climate change marches are acceptable. But events where you advocate for the survival of small businesses in your community, well, those are verboten. Those are completely illegal. Well, that is something the police are going to have to explain in court. Here's Jenna Little to give us an update to Dave's case. Here.
We've gone to court a couple times for Mr. Bylsma. We have yet to receive the Crown's brief, so we don't really know what exactly their strategy is. But we can say that regardless of what their strategy is and what they want to do, we will be filing charter motions on behalf of Mr. Bylsma, because the right to assemble and the right to freedom of expression are two clear charter rights that were violated in this situation.
So I guess that's you've told us a little bit of your strategy, which is great because, you know, people want to know how you're fighting, but we don't want to give too much away to the other side. But no. we have seen a lot of these tickets come from political rallies, and I think that's been one of the greater casualties of the pandemic has been civil liberties and our ability to express ourselves on issues that are affecting us day to day. I mean, when you're being locked down, you should have the right to be able to protest what the government's doing to you.
Absolutely. You should have the right to protest what the government's doing to you at any time. The entire spirit of that section of the charter is to challenge a political structure. So the fact that these protests are going on and they're directly challenging the power of the government, that falls right within the charter rights. And I find it very interesting because I've seen other cases with other types of politicians who have been charged. And at these same rallies, there are their colleagues or their city councilors, et cetera, but they don't get charged because they're there to observe, which I think is really interesting, because what's the difference between observing and not observing? I mean, if you're there, you're gathering, and that's it. Everybody needs to be treated equally under the law.
Well, and it seems as though these protests and the charges and tickets that come from the protests, they're breaking down political lines. So you can attend a BLM protest, you can take a knee in the middle of a BLM protest. That's fine. But if you go to a protest wherein you speak out against the lockdown as a politician with a political viewpoint, you're subject to, I guess, in the case of Maxime Bernier, arrest. In the case of Randy Hillier, tickets, and in the case of Mr. Bylsma, fines.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not talking about simple fines either. We're talking about summons. And these summons face tens of thousands of dollars of fines. And the problem is that the prosecutors and crowns generally don't have a directive that they've been given on how to handle these things. And it's not their fault that the government has created these rules and given no direction. But they fall back on what they know, which is, well, just plead as is and take the $5,000 or $10,000 fine, which is crazy. Why would you give somebody that amount of a fine for simply attending a protest or attending an Easter dinner? It's ridiculous.
I know it might seem that way, but Dave Bylsma is not alone. In Alberta, my friend, United We Roll organizer Glenn Carrott resigned his position as town councillor in Innisfail, Alberta, in protest after being sanctioned and investigated for his anti-lockdown stance. Glenn's now running for mayor of Innisfail, and he received a ticket for hosting an outdoor campaign event earlier this year with the Easter Bunny. It's so ridiculous. Then the Alberta government got a restraining order against Glenn that would see him arrested if he protested the lockdown anymore. Glenn is another Fight the Fines client too, along with approaching 2,500 other normal people who receive lockdown tickets for just, being normal and living their lives without being in constant fear. If you'd like to help us help Dave and Glenn and the approximately 2,500 other normal Canadians who stood up for small businesses and normalcy, the old kind of normalcy, not the new kind of normalcy, and who got in trouble for resisting the mainstreaming of government overreactions and lockdowns, please donate today at fightthefines.com. And all donations there now qualify for a charitable tax receipt through our partnership with the registered Canadian charity, the Democracy Fund. And thanks again to all of you who have donated and continue to donate to these important civil liberties efforts. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Mayor Dave Bylsma stood up for his community like we expect mayors to do. He stood up for small businesses, and then a cancel culture mob made sure he got a lockdown infraction for doing it. Well, that's not going to stand. We have to help Dave, and we don't allow police to be motivated by politics in this country. We're helping Dave through fightthefines.com, and you can donate to help him too. And good news, all donations there now qualify for a charitable tax receipt through the registered Canadian charity, the Democracy Fund.